Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt for the Remnant Forum. Well, another day, another round of papal scandals in Rome. This week, Pope Francis's Vatican announced that there is evidently salvation outside the Catholic Church, that one need not be baptized to be saved, nor subject to the Roman pontiff, nor in any sense a follower of Jesus Christ. I kid you not. The pronouncement against working toward the conversion of Jews or trying to lead others, lead Jewish people to the truth of Jesus Christ. This came in a major Vatican document released Thursday by the Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews. It was issued to mark the 50th anniversary of Nostra Aetate, a declaration, of course, promulgated by the Second Vatican Council in 1965 on the Church's relations with Jews and non-Christians. The new Vatican document is entitled, quote, "The Gifts and Calling of God are Irrevocable," end quote. And it discusses at length how Christianity is rooted in Judaism. Because of this, it argues, the Church is, quote, "obliged to view evangelization to Jews who believe in the one God in a different manner from that to other people of other religions and other worldviews, which means that the Catholic Church neither conducts and no longer supports any specific institutional mission work directed towards Jews," end quote. Now, this prompted, ironically enough, an organization called the Jews for Jesus to denounce the Vatican for what they call pandering to Jewish leaders. Their executive, David Brickner, released a statement on Friday last saying that his organization finds the Vatican's position egregious. And he asked the question, quote, "How can the Vatican ignore the fact that the Great Commission of Jesus Christ mandates that his followers are to bring the gospel to all people? Are they merely pandering to some leaders in the Jewish community who applaud being off the radar for evangelization by Catholics? If so, they need to be reminded that they first received that gospel message from the lips of Jews who were for Jesus," end quote. So the confusion and the chaos continues. Mr. Brickner, unfortunately, I don't think realizes that this is basically hate speech. The Gospels themselves are hate literature, and any Christian who believes that the Church, needs to reach out to those to try to bring towards salvation, believes what the Church taught for 2,000 years about the salvific nature of Jesus Christ as the sole means of salvation. Anyone who believes that way is a radicalized threat to society, which is why Pope Francis has been calling such Christians fundamentalists, rigorous, Neo-Pelagians, and everything else he can think of, because he's working with the new militantly secularist state and regimes who are against what they call religious supremacism. Now remember that term, because it applies to most of us. Religious supremacism. If you believe there is objective religious truth, if you believe one church is true and other churches are not true, you are guilty of religious supremacism. This is the latest sort of variety of hate speech and hate thought. Of course, it's also the stuff which motivated great Christian missionaries and martyrs such as Isaac Jogues, but no one's talking about that anymore. This belief that others need to have the faith of Jesus Christ shared with them. This is done out of love. It's not done out of hate. It is not. You can't force someone to be Catholic, and no missionary ever tried to do such an absurd thing. But they did believe that men and women all around the world needed to hear the salvific words of Jesus Christ, needed to be baptized, needed to become Catholics in order to be saved. What God will do with those who are not Catholic is between God and them. All we know is what the Church has infallibly taught for a long time. Extra ecclesia, nulla salus. Outside the Church, there is no salvation. And so it is our job to try to convert everyone to the faith in Jesus Christ. And by that I mean lovingly share the faith, the truth, with everyone, including our Jewish brothers and sisters. But the Vatican, in its effort to be uber politically correct, has apparently hoisted the white flag again and has decided no more. So that's one thing. Then we're on to the de facto creation of on-the-spot, on-demand divorce, which in a moment we're going to talk about with Chris Ferrara, because that seems to be what Pope Francis's team has done with respect to divorce. It's another scandal, and it's another terrifying little footnote to what's been happening over the past few weeks. Climate change. Climate change now is all over the news, and the Vatican is well in bed with the United Nations and Al Gore and everybody else. Climate change. We have Vatican officials this week who are saying that Pope Francis's teachings on global warming have the same magisterial weight as the church's teaching against abortion. I, I kid you not. You've got all sorts of things that are happening right now. And of course, there's this bizarre light show. Truly was an outrage on St. Peter's Basilica, with the Vatican teaming up once again with the World Bank, the United Nations, Jeffrey Sachs, the Sustainable Development Cats. On December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, the Vatican and its global partners, under the auspices of the United Nations, conducted this climate change laser light show at the Vatican to launch Pope Francis's Year of Mercy. If I described it, you wouldn't believe it, so let's just take a look. That's about all we can handle of that. You can Google that and check it out yourself online. And there are a lot of people who are really upset about this. I'm going to bring our friend Chris Ferrara in to chat about some of this. Chris Ferrara joins us from his home in Virginia. Chris, Father John Zulsdorf called this light show irreverent and even a form of sacrilege on his blog. Our friends over at LifeSite News started a petition to try to end it, to do something about it. The petition, if anyone wants to go sign it, is called "I Oppose Use of St. Peter's for Climate Change Light Show." Chris, this is certainly not the worst thing that's happened, but it might be one of the most ridiculous and scandalous and most visual indications of the crisis that we're in. What do you think about the great Immaculate Conception light show over the bones of St. Peter in the Vatican?
Well, the light show is an iconic event in the post-conciliar madness that has gripped the church, because, as we know, the church is the light of the world because Christ is the light of the world. With this spectacle, we see the world casting its light upon the church, literally the heart of Catholic worship, St. Peter's Basilica. And it was an endless sequence of completely worldly images and images of other religions, including a woman in a burqa. And who was the sponsor, the financier of this preposterous undertaking? It was the World Bank. The World Bank is the same institution that extorts compliance with its demands for reproductive health policies that involve contraception and abortion, in exchange for which it grants loans, without which these countries would go under. So this international extortionist organization is given the go-ahead to finance this obscene spectacle, which has outraged people far beyond the scope of the traditionalist movement. Even Philip Lawler was outraged by it, although he expressed his outrage in a rather muted way. But what we saw here was nothing less than sacrilege. In fact, blasphemy, because it took place on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Another important element of this is that the images of the church were all shrouded in darkness, including the nativity scene, while this spectacle was projected onto the facade of St. Peter's Basilica. You couldn't have a more perfect representation of what has gone wrong in the church since the council. The church goes dark, and the world projects its images onto the church. A perfect representation of the state of the church.
It's Chris. It's just amazing because now we have it in lights, so to speak. I mean, it's been projected all over our building. What they're doing, what they're all about. The fact that Pope Francis. Oh, you can't blame the media for this one. This is the Vatican's initiative with the Pope's obvious blessing. He is teaming up with Jeffrey Sachs, Al Gore types, World Bank, United Nations, pro-aborts, the world over, to show his solidarity with them, Chris. And as you say, the church goes dark in the meantime. What is it going to take? I feel like a broken record, but what is it going to take for our friends, the neo-Catholics, to realize something terrible has happened here, Chris? They're not hiding it. This isn't media spin. This isn't tratty interpretation. I don't really know of anyone, any Catholic, who looked at that spectacle of this ridiculous sort of, 10-year-old light show. And by that I mean the still shots of the lion and the big scary growl going. I mean, it was pretty low tech, but it was so offensive. I don't know of any Catholic who looked at that and just didn't go, What the heck is going on over there?
Well, it's a three-ring circus, and its promises to get even more bizarre and ridiculous in the months to come. I'm afraid we have a pope who is not content unless he's unleashing the latest surprise upon the church. He's already threatened us with a series of gestures during the so-called Year of Mercy, which many people are calling the Year of False Mercy. And we've already had the first of these gestures last Friday when, by a rescript, he confirmed the enactment of his so-called reform of the annulment procedure and basically said to the bishops, you'd better start cranking out the annulments immediately under my streamlined procedure. And in that document, here's what he said was his reason for these so-called annulment reforms. The church, he says, with these reforms, is now wanting to show precisely the closeness of the church to wounded families, desiring that the multitude of those who live the drama of marital failure be reached by the healing work of Christ through ecclesiastical structures. Now, what is this drama of marital failure? There is no drama of marital failure in the Catholic Church. If there is a marriage, the marriage is indissoluble. It doesn't fail. What fails is the correspondence of one party or another to the marital vow. But there is a marriage which remains indissoluble. He seems to be confusing the idea of an annulment with the impossibility of a marital failure when the marriage is sacramental. If there is a marriage, the church can do nothing but provide what she's always provided to the people involved in the marriage. If they separate, there's counseling, there's pastoral counseling for them, and as long as they don't enter into a new marriage, they can receive the sacraments. If one party remarries or both parties remarry, he or she or both of them are prohibited from receiving the sacrament as long as they remain in adulterous relations. He seems to think that there is a multitude of marital failures in the church, and if he means that sacramental marriages have failed, this is obviously disastrous because he's denying the indissolubility of marriage. Perhaps there's confusion on his part. But if he's talking about marital failure in the sense of an annulment, the annulment procedure says there never was a marriage. So there was no marriage to fail. They simply were never married in the first place. If he thinks that there is a multitude of invalid marriages in the church, he's basically saying to the Catholic faithful, hey, your marriage is probably invalid. And so if you think you got a raw deal with your spouse, take advantage of the new annulment procedure, and we'll be happy to tell you that you were never married. That, to me, is a disastrous loosening of the standards for reform of the annulment procedure that John Paul II and Benedict XVI both tightened up.
Yeah, that's the thing, Chris. This isn't an accident. I mean, imagine how this is going to resonate with the dumbed down, thanks to the spirit of Vatican II and the opening of the window to the world and all this over the past 50, 70 years. You know, folks don't really know the catechism anymore. They don't know their faith. Catholic identity is gone. John Paul talked about a silent apostasy. So imagine how this is going to resonate with the Catholic world, what's left of it today. Most Catholics today, so many Catholics today, I should say, have a son or a daughter, a brother, a sister, a father, a mother who are in one of these broken, failed marriage situations. And so all of a sudden we've got the babysitter, the person in charge, coming out and say, hey, you can drink beer, you can have cigarettes, you can do whatever you want. I mean, that's going to go over really, really well with the vast majority of dumbed down, sorry, but they have been spiritually dumb, maybe not, but as far as catechetics, they've been dumbed down. And that's just the reality of where we are. And here you have you and people like us at the Remnant. We're those fundamentalists, those rigorists who are going to be pointing at the teaching of the church, and we're going to look real silly. And so I don't see any stopping this, in other words. This is a huge, huge revolution in the church if Francis continues down this road.
It's a revolution within a revolution. We've been through 50 years of revolution, and now we're going to have a new stage of revolution, which Francis refers to as a revolution of tenderness. The latest slogan in the endless parade of slogans and the endless parade of horribles that have afflicted the church since the council. A revolution in tenderness means what exactly? When has the church ever been lacking in tenderness? Apparently the revolution in tenderness means we're going to make it very easy for you to have a diocesan tribunal tell you that you were never married. And when you send that message to everyone in the church, you're telling people, take advantage of this. There's an escape hatch for you. And he himself said, when he announced the initial reforms of the annulment procedure, that it did not escape him that abbreviating the process in these so-called fast-track cases could threaten the principle of indissolubility. What was his answer to that? Not to worry. We'll let the bishop be the judge of the fast-track annulment proceedings. You mean the same bishops that had to be reined in by John Paul II because they were running annulment mills? Is this a joke? The bishop is about the last person you would go to for a sober, prudent, and reluctant declaration of nullity on the basis of the Church's perennial presumption of the validity of marriages. The only break on the process during John Paul II's reign and during the reign of Benedict XVI was the diocesan tribunal staffed by competent canonists. Now you're going to turn the process over to these bishops, most of whom are wacky and are just waiting to hand out annulments like lollipops.
No, that's right. And you got Archbishop Supich, Francis's boy down in Chicago, who's gone beyond that. Now he's calling for gay and lesbian to come to the sacraments, and he's sort of erasing that whole moral sort of impasse there. I mean, this is crazy, Chris. You start putting it all in context. We've got free and easy annulments, maybe de facto Catholic divorce coming up. You've got atheists going to heaven. Protestants don't need to convert. He's got this. We started the monologue talking about the fact that now our Jewish brothers and sisters are on their own. You fend for yourself, folks. You don't need the Catholic Church. You don't need Christ. You don't need to be under the Roman Pontiff. What's going on, Chris? How much more ridiculous can this go, and we continue to call it Catholic? This isn't the Catholic Church anymore. What is it?
It's a massive, ongoing, now in its 50th year, fraud upon the faithful. A false religion being masqueraded as the Catholic religion, not in any official way, though. And this latest document on the Jewish question, the question of evangelizing the Jews and Jewish conversion, is Exhibit A. Here is what the document says in its opening paragraph. The text is not a magisterial document or doctrinal teaching of the Catholic Church, but is rather a reflection prepared by the Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews on current theological questions that have developed since the Second Vatican Council. In other words, it's utterly worthless. It's not Catholic teaching. The document itself says so. What is it doing on the Vatican website? It's all part of this massive, ongoing ecclesiastical deception that there is a new church, a new religion, when actually not a single jot or tittle of our religion has been changed by the Second Vatican Council. The deception goes on. Yeah, I keep hearing that on our website and com boxes on Facebook and so forth. What doctrine has Francis changed? What's your problem? Well, we've seen this now for 50 years. Yeah, they don't change doctrine officially. At least they try not to, although Casper comes pretty close. But officially they don't. But what happens is a de facto change, Chris, and the whole of the Catholic world and the non-Catholic world now believes the Catholic Church teaches that atheists go to heaven. Jews don't need to be Jews, Protestants, non-Catholics. They don't need to come under the embrace of Mother Church. Baptism isn't necessary. That's the perception now. And so it doesn't really matter about the technicality other than we can point to it and say, yeah, we can fight this because this is not infallible teaching of the Church. This is novelty, which is what we've been saying from the start. But other than that, the reality is most people in the world today believe the Catholic Church has completely surrendered. Well, by the time you tote up all of the people that don't have to convert to be saved or even believe to be saved, the Protestants don't have to profess the true faith to be saved. The Jews, they have their own covenant, which has never been revoked. They don't have to profess the true faith to be saved. Atheists, if they perform good works, well, God will take that into consideration. And simple humanitarian gestures devoid of the motive of supernatural charity, well, those would suffice. So basically, who's condemned at this point? Apparently, only fundamentalist Catholics are going to hell. The only people who go to hell these days, according to this new attitude, which has never actually been proposed as the official teaching of the Church, the only people going to hell are those who believe in hell. Yeah. And those are the fundamentalists who belong in hell now, according to the new dispensation. Yeah, that's just it. And we kind of touched on that earlier. If you think this isn't going to touch you as a practicing Catholic who believes in everything that the Church teaches, it's going to touch you, and it's going to touch you real soon.
Whether we can continue to teach the catechism after these men get through with their games is going to be problematic. Whether that's not going to be considered a hateful thing to do, to teach your children about, yes, the religious supremacy of the church that Christ founded. This is what's coming. This is why, again, let's go back to the petition. I don't like the word, but let's go back to this initiative which you and I just worked on this past week at the Remnant newspaper, to try to raise an alarm, to try to reach out with a filial appeal to the Holy Father. Remember, he asked for the faithful to give their input. We don't know what else to do, Chris, so we made a filial appeal to the Holy Father saying, if this track is going to continue, if this is the way it has to be in the future, then would you please do as you indicated yourself you would do, which is to abdicate or step down like Benedict did. It's time to do it, Holy Father, if this is going to continue. And the scandal of the church, scandal of the faithful is going to go on. It would be better to do what you and I both don't really approve of, papal abdication, but that would be better than the loss of faith and the loss of souls that seems to be in the very near future for us.
Well, we don't reject the idea of a pope abdicating as such if it were necessary for the good of the church. What we object to is the idea that the pope, when he gets really tired and worn out, even though he's been a good defender of orthodoxy and orthopraxis, should just step down and retire like the executive of a Fortune 500 company.
Right.
That's what we object to. If a pope were to determine, as St. Celestine did, that his pontificate is a disaster, that he can't govern the church because he's simply incompetent and everything he does is wrong and is causing grave harm to the church, then a pope should consider stepping down. And Boniface VIII, as we point out in our so-called petition, which is nothing more than a prayer, a request for something, Pope Boniface VIII affirms solemnly that it's part of the power of the papacy to renounce the office itself. The other thing we object to is the idea that a pope could renounce the papacy while retaining some aspect of the papacy, as Benedict purports to have done when he says, I've renounced the active exercise of the ministry while retaining the passive element of prayer and suffering. That's a nice idea, but it causes confusion, which is not to say, of course, that Francis was not the validly elected pope.
Right. So why don't let's talk just for a moment by way of conclusion here, because we're running out a little short on time. But the petition, the idea of the petition. Some people are saying, "Oh, this is arrogant. This is prideful. Who do you think you are? You're acting like a bunch of Protestants." But Chris, I'd like to put this in the context in which you and I wrote this thing, and that's more. This is something that sons are entitled to do and maybe duty bound to do with respect to their father. And we've all pointed out, we've got it right from the lips of Our Lady of Fatima herself, and from Sister Lucy, that the Holy Father would have much to suffer, that all the forces of hell are working against Peter, which makes sense. Take Peter out, destroy the Catholic Church, destroy the central ruling authority of the church, and you're going to destroy not only the Catholic Church, but the whole world is going to go into chaos. So we've admitted this from the start. We have it from Our Lady that this is likely, that the forces of hell are working against even the Holy Father to make him diabolically disoriented. If that's happening to your father, what do? Do you sit back and relax and say, well, let's let God take care of that? Or do you say, Dad, you need to look at us. You need to listen to us. Something's gone wrong. They've gotten inside your head. They're leading you in a very dangerous way. These forces of evil. We love the papacy. We love the Pope. We need to reach out and help. That's the spirit in which that's written. And that sometimes I think is missed by the neo-Catholic folks, who their go-to plan has been for years now to just sit by and let everything happen, which is not the way the church works. The church is divine and the church is a human institution. The human institution is used by God through human elements, through human beings. And that's what this little humble effort is. Our effort as sons of the church, faithful sons of the church, to do something at a moment of crisis that is unsurpassed in the history of the church. And that's reach out to the Holy Father and say, this is the wrong way, Holy Father, from everything we know and understand as Catholics.
Well, of course we have the right to express our views in this regard. I mean, this is not a demand that the Pope resign. We have no right to demand that a Pope step down from office. We do have the right to point out that a pope who is harming the church should recognize that he's harming the church, and as the petition says, change course. And if he refuses to change course, we have the right to suggest that he consider, for the good of the church, renouncing the office, as Catherine of Siena suggested to Gregory XI when he was failing to exercise his authority to set the church aright in the midst of one of the great crises in church history. We have every right to make that request, as long as we do it respectfully, and this is a respectfully worded document. There's not a harsh word in it. There's a lot of harsh truth in it, because we report the things that the Pope has said and done over the past 2.5 years that have shocked and scandalized Catholics and have earned him the unanimous praise of all major world leaders and all major world media outlets. How is that not a disaster for the Church? That the world loves this Pope and can't stop praising him. We have the right to point these things out and to say to the Pope, really think about what you're doing to the Church, and if you can't bring yourself to change, for the love of God, think about renouncing, as Catherine said to Gregory. It would be better to renounce what you have assumed if you will not exercise your power as you should. That's all this document does. There's nothing scandalous or arrogant about it, and that's why 30,000 people have read it and something like 5,000 people have signed it, because it represents the pent-up feelings of Catholics all over the world. Aren't we allowed to express our feelings? Everyone else is in the Church of Mercy that has suddenly arisen with the election of Pope Francis. Well, these are our feelings. And let's remember that when Marital and Alessandro Gnocchi, at the very beginning of the pontificate, wrote a very scathing critique of Francis under the title, "We Do Not Like This Pope," what did Francis do? He called up Mario Palmaro, thanked him for it, and said it was important that he receive these criticisms. Well, this petition is in the same vein. It's an effort by laymen to bring the Pope to an awareness of what he is doing to the Church, and at this point it's impossible to deny that he is causing harm to the Church.
No, that's it. That's it, Chris. And it's been kind of sort of a beautiful thing that's unfolding since this this initiative, I guess, was launched 3 or 4 days ago, and it's gone into it started in English, it went into Spanish, it was translated into Italian, it's translated into French, into Romanian, into Croatian. Tomorrow we're going to have a Russian translation. It's translating into Latin. It'll be in German on Tuesday. So what we're seeing here is the remnant in action, and I hope our viewers will take that consolation from this, because I know we have. The remnant literally in action. It's a small remnant. It's just what's left. We didn't invent anything new. We simply clung to the old teachings of the Church, which are still there and which are still infallible and which are still necessary for salvation. And you can see the worldwide remnant in action, even over this small petition. So I think that it's really important for people to see this as for what it is. It's not an effort for us to be brash or to assume an attitude that's not rightfully ours. We have to do this. It's been done, and it's very successful. And we need you to help support this thing so that we can reach the Holy Father and get this message through to him.
Well, I think people should understand this for what it amounts to, which is nothing more than a provocation in the good sense of the word, something intended to provoke discussion in the Church, and to provoke, we hope, if the Holy Father sees it, a reconsideration of the course that he has chosen. And it's a course in which he himself has made it clear he intends to pursue one surprise after another, and as one of his advisors said, I forget which one it was, reform the Church in ways that will be irreversible and impossible to undo by his successor. That to me connotes recklessness, and what we're trying to do is provoke, in the good sense of the word, discussion of this problem among Catholics, and hopefully even in the Vatican itself, if someone stumbles across this document and if the Pope somehow is presented with it so that he can read it. That's all this is about. It's not about any kind of demand that the Pope resign. The suggestion that he considers stepping down is nothing other than a suggestion that he do what he himself said he would do if he felt that he were incapable of governing the Church.
No, that's it. That's it, Chris. And there's been you did the lion's share of writing on this document, and kudos to you. It's excellent. And it's really resonating with a lot of people. I've gotten some really wonderful email and letters from priests who are Novus Ordo, in the Novus Ordo establishment, don't even say the Latin Mass, saying, please kind of keep this up, guys, because you're not alone as traditionalists being very concerned and calling for prayer and everything else. We're terrified. We're priests saying the Novus Ordo Mass. We need to see something happen as well. And so this is a small initiative, but people are getting behind it. And we're going to leave it up on the website for the whole year of mercy, hoping to get up there in that million range signature and hopefully attract the Pope's attention and bring about some at least slowing of the pace of this direction in which this pontificate's been heading. And I think it's heading in a disastrous direction. So,
well, buckle up your seatbelt, because I think this Pope has a whole series of rude shocks in store for the Church in the year to come. And this petition is nothing more than a cry from the heart by people who are desperate. We don't know what to do. Of course, we have to pray. We have to do penance to the extent that we're able. These are the spiritual weapons at our disposal. But the idea that we should otherwise do nothing is ridiculous. We had to do something, and this is what we've done.
Yeah. Good enough, sir. I think next week, if you're up for it, let's have a chat about this de facto divorce, because one of the things that I think is ironic about what seems to be unfolding out of the Francis playbook with respect to marriage, it's going to be worse than the Orthodox. I don't think we're talking about, 2 strikes or something. It seems to me that there's going to be an infinite possibility here to have several divorces or whatever they're going to call them. And again, the attack on marriage is primary right now, and I think it's so important that people understand what's happening. So next week, let's bring that up again. What's going on with the marriage question?
That's fine. God bless, Mike.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you then. Thanks.